GameDevs. In this video, we're going to talk about level design, documentation, layout, and best practices. How to create a level. We're mostly going to be using side scrollers as examples because we're using that in class, but really this applies out anywhere to kind of any level design process. But in order to create fun and well-balanced levels, it takes immense amount of effort, and multiple aspects of game design need to be in place before a single level is created. We're not going to go over everything in a game design document that you're going to need in order to make something, but what we are going to do is talk about some of the basics of how to create those smaller experiences that allow you to utilize existing mechanics in an interesting way. And that can be really the difference between a fun game and a boring game, is the pacing, how you introduce elements. There's a lot of games that I have that we called like there's a game called EVE Online. There's something that the developers have even called the learning cliff. That is just an immense thing. They've worked really hard to in the last 10 years to kind of soften that cliff, but it's still there. And it can be how we present stuff. So the first thing you want to do is you want to define your gameplay components. Okay, so in Iron Man or Captain America, whatever, Iron Man, for instance, we had combat, platforming, and puzzles. Puzzles, these are just conceptually like, what is it that you're going to be doing in a given 5 minutes or beat. So we had melee combat, we had puzzles, and we had platform. These were like the three main components. Obviously, there's a lot of different combat. There's a lot of different kind of puzzles. There's a lot of different kind of platforming. But this allowed us to figure out how to pace the player, because what happens is that people get tired doing one thing after, if they're just what you might call grinding, if they're just doing puzzles all the time, if they're just doing one thing or another. So you want to define your gameplay components, at least broadly. Maybe make some icons. We're going to do some documentation. And the first thing that we're going to do as we're exploring our gameplay is to create combat arenas. Now, a combat arena, or just, a test arena, is a room that tries to take a single mechanic, let's say jumping, for instance, and provide every different version of jumping that there could be. It allows designers to create a set of building blocks that they can later copy out. But it is also really important to define all this, because your artists are going to need to work with you. And the artists are going to have a lot of challenges if you don't stay consistent with some sort of internal logic. So for instance, like, one of the things that we determine right away is how tall the character is. It's usually 6 units, 6 feet. How high are they when they crouch? How thick are they? How tall is the doorway? In Unreal, I think 2K4, the characters were like double wide compared to what real human scales are. So, you have to keep that in mind when you're working in level design, and how to do what kind of doors are what. You have to be able to figure out all of this, and the best way to do that is to create a series of test rooms, so that you don't have to slog through like narrative or combat. It's something you can load in at any time. Oftentimes these get shipped with game, like I think I mentioned Mass Effect shipped with one that was pretty good. So, you have to determine all your elements here. Wall jump, how far away is wall jump? Your door heights. You want to define that your character probably 6 units tall. You want to define your jump lengths. So what is easy, medium, and hard, right? So we don't necessarily want to just say like, what is the maximum jump length? We also want to create some visual architecture. We'll talk about that more. But we want to create some visuals that allow us to guess exactly what kind of experience we're going to get, so you can kind of have some standard movement, because when players are moving around, they may only have a split second to figure that out, and they want to know whether or not it's a jump or a double jump. I'm sure you've all run into a point where you thought you could jump up on something that's like waist high, and then you just couldn't. and that was very frustrating. That's also one of the things you have to figure out is how to telegraph what is climbable, what is not. And to telegraph that, you have to develop some consistency within your building blocks. You should definitely utilize, if you're utilizing Illustrator or whatever, you'll be able to utilize symbols. We'll talk about that a bit. I typically create a series of these rooms. I work through all of these problems right away. Don't forget also like the viewable screen size. That's something that's really important to put on your documentation so that you can kind of see how zoomed in or zoomed out you are, right? So the gameplay flow, okay, the difficulty curve. So once you have all of those elements of combat and puzzling or whatever, you want to string them together. And this is kind of like left to right is time. So let's say that this is one level, and from bottom to top is difficulty. So the y-axis is a difficulty axis. So we start off really with more combat heavy, and then we end up in a more platformery and puzzly environment at the end. That is significantly harder than some of the other stuff that's out there. So that combat at the end is kind of probably a mini boss or a boss, and then there's like this kind of easier platforming afterwards and a puzzle challenge, because that combat would be pretty heavy. So this is kind of the pacing that we would do, and that maybe on the right is the exit to level 2 or whatever. So so this is the kind of pacing we would do, just generally to kind of place our project within the other area, within the other projects. We would also identify what mechanics we were teaching, and we would identify, and this is a really great way to organize your thoughts. Every time you teach a new mechanic, there's the chemistry of game design, there's Atoms by Daniel Cook, which kind of illuminates a lot of the same ideas. But the way you want to be introducing mechanics is you want to teach them one by one. So if you have a new one, so if you're level 3 and you get the shotgun for the first time, you want to work through how the shotgun works with the player. You want to challenge them with easy challenges that are safe, and then move and progress. And you want to kind of sprinkle this in. If you just stick it all at the beginning, it's not going to be very effective. You want to sprinkle this in throughout the level. So you might put, some of these tutorials in between with the shotgun in between or right before each battle in order to then utilize that mechanic in battle. So, every mechanic has a learning pattern that you need to adopt. A talented designer is going to teach the player about mechanics without knowing they're taught. So let's think about the leap of faith, right? So this in video games, there's often a difficulty trying to figure out, okay, should the player jump off something or not? Because sometimes you need to get down off of something. Typically what you do is you either have death pits, like things that will kill you, or you don't. There's also a third option, which is to display some visual cues that indicate to the player how they should behave in that area. This happens a lot, like in the first Assassin's Creed specifically. There's the developers talk about how they use white cloth in order to indicate vertical maneuvering. So from going from the floor to like the rooftops. So anytime there's white cloth on boxes, those boxes were designed with visual architecture so that it looked the same. It was visual. The artwork was also the same. So here I set up a little lip. And this little lip means that when you run into it, you're forced to jump. So already I'm kind of indicating that you need to jump. But then I'm also using this arched geometry to create the indicative silhouette of jumping, right? And, there'd probably be some walk up and some practice where you could probably see the floor the first time you jump off this. And then the second time, maybe we introduce the mechanic with a little bit of difficulty. Maybe requiring them to jump over it, but then coordinate running away from something or dodging an enemy on the other side. Or perhaps there is, some other collectible over there. The other thing that we want to do is when we're using color, and this is just specifically about color, you want to be conscious that some people are colorblind. So not only do you want to use color, you want to make sure that color isn't going to be affecting some of the colorblind. You want to make sure that you're not affecting some of the colorblind issues. So there is a couple. There's I think there's like 8 different kinds of color blindness, but the ones that you're going to come across the most are red, green, and then blue, yellow. There's blue, yellow, and then there's total color blindness. So those are the common ones. There's also some really fantastic art. So the best way to do this is if you're looking at the color wheel, to stay away or to avoid choosing colors, like just don't choose the color of exactly the same hue. There's also some tools in Photoshop and even on your computer now that will show you what the colorblind version of something looks like. So it's always good to do that. But you can also utilize lighting and other things that are available to everyone in order to get your point across. So once you're starting to think about your level, even if you're not making the level, you still want to know what is inside of it. You want to indicate to your artist, what kind of room is this? And this is where mood boards come in handy, the art imaging, the art image collections. This is where it's really helpful to provide to your artist the feel of what you're looking for. The other thing to do is to create some dummy artwork that will allow you to indicate where things are or things are supposed to be. So if it's a Roman column area, make some columns and make them proportional to what they might look like. Just because they're square doesn't mean that they won't be easily replaced in that way. But what you want to do is you want to vary your visuals as you're going through level design. Each room or area should be different. You want to vary the scale of the depth of how far away it is, how far away stuff is, how much claustrophobia there is. Maybe you want to add some elements to kind of gussy it up by creating foreground elements. And that, another aspect is creating verticality, moving up and down. I really emphasize this when you're making side-scroller games, but even in 3D games, shooter games, you want to go up and down in levels as well. Verticality is really important. You also, when you're creating your worlds, it's really impossible to make everything. But in this case, we have like some zombies that are knocking at a door, but they can't exactly be seen. And hinting at things in the world without developing the whole environment can be really valuable to your storytelling in your world. I think it was natural selection. There was long time ago, even on the forums, I think Charlie might have even written it up. There was a description of like how to create really interesting levels. And one of the suggestions was, crack open a door so that you can just see down the hallway and maybe see some more area, but not everything. You don't have to build it all out and have it all controllable, but hint at other areas. Think about how the world that you're moving through is actually interconnected with a much larger area. And that will really cement the storytelling that you're going to be doing. So when you're creating a level, you need to create, a level design document. And there's a lot of different things in here. And this is just kind of a overview, table of contents. But in your planning phase, you're going to need to think about how the level is going to flow. What's happening each set of the way. This is that level flow that I was showing you earlier in an image. This is just it's just indicated in text here. And you're going to want to talk about the challenges that you're specifically doing. Maybe you're introducing enemies 2, 4, and 7. Maybe the challenge is that this is like a sticky bomb area or whatever. So maybe you're using certain things or whatever. You're using certain mechanics or you're excluding other ones. That goes to show good game design when you're varying what you're doing and your challenges. And then you're also going to put your story summary. This is a paragraph at most. You don't need a lot to do. The important thing here is to discuss the level walkthrough. And usually what we do is we walk through or we put objectives on a map and or a map sketch. You want to list each one, where it is, what it's going. The other thing that we need to talk about is the atmosphere, the look and feel, as it were. This is something that, what kind of feelings does my level evoke from the player? Are they scared? Is the level supposed to be abandoned or under attack? Is it falling apart? Is it new construction? All of that are mood elements that will inform not only your work, but the artist's work. So if there's no power and all the doors don't work, maybe you need to smash through the doors, right? So even when you're thinking about scene and setting, it actually can help you make better games that are more cemented in the world, instead of like the doors just opening up automatically. So as far as story goes, you just want to blurb what the story is, the key locations. These are where you want to spend a lot of your money. The art is going to spend a lot of time. These are also, called wow moments sometimes as well. A really good example of this is in Half-Life 2. The player comes across this vista right before they enter a cave. They first get their first look at like District 17, the Combine Tower. That was like an extremely pivotal scene of like conveying a lot of the storytelling moment. And so because of that, they wanted, you want to make sure that that's really focused on. So that's something to point out. These wow moments sometimes can be scripted elements. So it's not only areas, which is why it's separate, but key locations is important for you to be able to highlight. The walkthrough critical path, you want to write down exactly how it works. Don't say like, "Ooh, it'll be a mystery" or something. You want to say, "This is how player one advances to the next level," and you should sketch that out on your thing. And by the way, another thing to note is, how are the objectives communicated to the player? Like, is it text read? Is it their enemies jumping into the screen? What is it that communicates? What am I supposed to do to figure this out? There's also sometimes if you have got like a Metroid style game or Castlevania Shadow Complex kind of game, you're going to have a lot of back and forth. So this critical path might look like a lot of crisscrossy stuff on your map. And so this is where Illustrator will come in handy as far as organizing levels and directions and that kind of stuff. Key wow moments. So wow moments don't necessarily just mean location. It means scripting or audio or whatever. What you want to do is identify opportunities to surprise the player. The more you surprise the player, not like jump scare, that's like the Doom 3 approach that gets tiring after a while. But the more you surprise the player with interesting or interesting things, the better. I remember one of the key wow moments on Iron Man 2 was there was like a big enemy, the Crimson Dynamo. I wanted him to burst out from behind the wall. So we had to do a custom animation, but it paid off. It looked really impressive and scary. Cinematics. This should be all the cinematics in the game. It should be not in the game, in the level. The content you're going to be introducing, and then like this is also a place for you to produce content and then maybe update it. Sometimes game designers will keep it in their own separate folder, and then you just have reference numbers. So the text here might not be there, but use traditional script font and all that kind of thing. It's really legible and it's helpful. The other thing you want to do is write down everything you're going to put in this level. What AI are going to be used? What objects and what mechanics are going to be used or taught? The bosses that are going to be taught, explain those and explain why you're using those. And don't say all of them, right? You don't want to do everything all the time. That's not a great way to pace your game. So once you're there, you can get to the sketching part. Okay, so the sketching part can be really fun. I use Illustrator a lot. You can use paper and pen if you'd like. Your mileage will vary in terms of accuracy and usefulness. But sketching a level in Illustrator, that can be be very helpful. I usually put characters for scale throughout the level, just so I know what's going on and that I have properly put what I need to there. I also put icons for collectibles, and I might indicate gameplay or other areas, critical path stuff in here. The other thing that I'm going to do is organize my data so that I can hide and show this. So for instance, on Wolverine, like late in the project, I had my Illustrator file all set up so that it was very easy to do. And thank goodness I did it. I had all of my collectibles on one layer. And they were hidden collectibles, so they were kind of hard to do. And my QA person really wanted a list of them and the locations, so it wouldn't take him an hour. It would take him 10 minutes to find everything. And that's very important. That saves him 45 minutes. So every time he needs to play the game, which is maybe a lot if he's testing it out. So in order to, we double checked. So all I had to do was I hid all of the other information and I just showed the collectibles, and it gave him a really clear map of what's going on. So in Illustrator, there's just a couple recommendations that I have. And the first thing you want to do is you want to determine that if it's a side view or top view when you're drawing in Illustrator. You can do it top down, you can do it sides as well, but determine your perspective. The second thing here is use color to represent distance, and the lighter it is, the closer. See how this is a lighter color blue than this darker blue? I'm denoting the closeness, and I could have done this as a gradient or something. And then if I put a back wall here, and in fact, let's go back here. So here we go. We have a light area here. We have a dark, a medium gray, and then a dark gray to indicate the back wall. So I'm using color as well as perspective lines, but I'm using color to kind of figure that out and to present it to you. Oops. The other thing you want to do is swatch your colors. Illustrator has a great button that allows you to kind of sample your colors and swatch them. You want to use the same colors all the time. If you go to color.adobe.com/create, this is actually a really wonderful tool that'll allow you to pick color schemes. These are the hex values. These are the things you might want to write down. Here's a set of swatches really quick. It allows you to do whatever you can do it any way you want, or you can use complementary colors here. And this will give you common sets of colors. So if you're completely, a doofus when it comes to color, I mean, you're not, but if you feel like you just can't do it, this will allow you to very quickly collect a set of them. And all you want to do is basically stick with the same set as much as you can. So the other thing that can be really valuable is layers. Sort your information by layers. Keep your main map in a one stroke. So use like vector lines, connect all of your vectors together so it's one contiguous piece or as few contiguous pieces. The one other thing you want to do when you're designing levels is you want to chunk out your levels to be areas. So like this room and then next room. I don't know if you've ever noticed in video games that you've been playing, but sometimes when you go from one area to another, you have to go through like a zigzaggy hallway. And the reason for that is when you go into that hallway, what we're doing as a developer is we're turning off all the artwork from the last room. We're like turning the lights off, and we're turning the lights on in the next room. So it's really important to chunk your level and figure out which area, or chunk your level visually so that you are able to load it and unload it. That can really aid in a game designer's ability to have a really optimized level. But use one stroke, connect all your vector lines together. The reason why is because vector is actually in Illustrator something that you can export straight into Maya or whatever. So you can use vector lines in Unity and Maya. And originally, when I was working back in the industry, we had a tool that a technical artist made. And the tool was, it would take the Illustrator file and then it would make the vector art. It would make a copy of the vector art. It would move it 10 units back, and then in Maya, you would import it in Maya, and then it would automatically loft. It would create geometry between it, and it would automatically generate a 2D side scroller by just putting the Illustrator file in. So this was really good, especially back in the day. A lot of my colleagues didn't have 3D experience when they were making levels. They only had Illustrator, which is much easier to get along with. So another aspect of Illustrator that's good, it matches up it will match up your grid units with Unity or Maya. It allows you to measure things accurately, and accuracy can be really important in making fewer revisions. And the first time you do stuff, you'll be way off. But in terms of like scale, you'll think, oh man, I thought that was going to be way bigger or way smaller than it was. That's the way it was for me. You just kind of get a feel for it after a while. But yeah, Illustrator also has symbols. Symbols are amazing. So the way you make a symbol is you put some artwork together, and you just right click, and make symbol. From these symbols, you are able to drag and drop, edit. It's just like a prefab in Unity. There are also 9-slice symbols. So if you want to make GUI or whatever, you can actually do that. It's the same process that Unity does. So there's a lot of really valuable stuff. This is Illustrator is primarily how I do my level design documentation. And I recommend that you do it too. If you have any questions about any of this, post them down below. What are the games out there that you've run into that have just really been hampered by a poor design, but could have been amazing? What games are there out there? Other than that, I will see you in class.